I have a special message to share for all of my mamas-to-be and my postpartum charters. You are officially invited to join us for a special exclusive round of Fertility Awareness Mastery Live, the postpartum edition. This is an all-new 3-month program specifically designed to help you navigate the postpartum period. From postpartum cervical mucus charting strategies that will help you avoid pregnancy to preparing for your next pregnancy, we've got you covered. We're starting in the second week of August. This is a rare opportunity to focus exclusively on postpartum charting, so make sure to join us. Head over to fertilityfriday.com/pp live to join us today. PP like postpartum. That's fertilityfriday.com/pp live. This is the Fertility Friday podcast, episode number 324. Welcome to the Fertility Friday podcast, your source for information about the fertility awareness method and all things fertility. I'm your host, Lisa Hendrickson-Jack. I'm the author of The Fifth Vital Sign and the Fertility Awareness Mastery Charting Journal. I'm a certified fertility awareness educator and holistic reproductive health practitioner with nearly 20 years of experience teaching women to connect to their fifth vital sign through menstrual cycle charting, balancing hormonal health, and optimizing the menstrual cycle without hormones. I'm outspoken about hormonal birth control and its impact on fertility and overall health because you have the right to know how your body works and how artificial hormones disrupt that natural process. I host live coaching programs to help you achieve optimal fertility and health because it's important to have healthy menstrual cycles regardless of whether or not you want to have babies. I'm also a wife and mother of 2 beautiful boys. I know, I'm a busy girl, but I managed to fit it all in. This podcast is designed to empower you to take full control of your cycles, your fertility, and your overall health. And I'm so excited that you're here with us today. I'm excited to share today's episode with you. Today is a really powerful episode. I'm sharing my interview with Christine McAlister. And as you'll hear on the podcast, we met recently and she offered to come on the show and share her experience, her personal infertility journey. And to be honest with you, at the time that I was listening to her, along with you when you listened to the episode, I wasn't actually familiar with her whole story. And so when you're listening to the episode in real time, you're right there with me because it was the first time that I had heard her full experience as well. And let me just say that not only did Christine struggle with fertility challenges, she also struggled with loss. But the most incredible part of her story is how she came through that and what happened on the other side. So without further ado, let's jump into today's episode with Christine. And I'm really excited to be here today with Christine McAlister. She is an entrepreneur, business coach. She is the author of the #1 bestseller, The Income Replacement Formula, 7 Simple Steps to Doing What You Love and Making 6 Figures from Anywhere. And you may wonder why I'm having an entrepreneur on the show, because that's not usually how I introduce my guests. But Christine had an incredibly powerful experience with fertility, and she managed to somehow turn those trials and heartbreaks into something positive. And so in today's episode, we're diving into her story. For those of you who've been listening to the show for a while, you know that I have had a number of episodes talking about loss, talking about fertility challenges, and really interviewing those who've been through those, because everyone who's listening is on a different stage of their journey. So some of you are no babies, but I know many of you are in the midst of your own challenges with fertility. So really excited to have you here, Christine. Thank you so much for coming to the show.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm excited too.
And we met in person a few months ago. We were in beautiful, sunny California, and we were just hanging out and doing a lot of really important, or having a lot of really important, powerful conversations. So I just had to mention that because when I saw your face, I was like, oh my goodness, the last time I saw you, we were so happy.
Yes, we were so happy. We were so warm.
no.
And we had both flown across the country to be there, and then we had to fly back across the country a very short while later, but it was worth it. And we got to share an Uber to the airport, which was also
Well, and
awesome.
you have a very new baby, and you were pumping throughout our whole trip constantly.
I was.
That's
Yes, thank you,
amazing.
Willow. That was a
Yes.
game changer.
Well, let's jump right in. I mean, you can start wherever you like, but I'd love to hear about your journey, your fertility journey, and how it led you to where we're at now.
Yeah. So I was a person who wasn't sure I could get pregnant. I had been diagnosed with PCOS. I had always, since high school, had irregular periods. And so I think because of that, I was somewhat ambivalent, like not willing to commit to the idea that I wanted to have kids because I wasn't sure I could. And then I was all up in my head about whether I was going to be good at being a parent because I got married a little bit later and I sort of in my mid-30s by the time I started really seriously thinking about all of this. And so there was just a lot of sort of like internal pressure and external pressure and uncertainty about becoming a parent. And so the way that I found out that I could get pregnant was, unfortunately, I had an early miscarriage. And that was confirmation for me that, oh my gosh, maybe this is possible. And I think kind of in that experience of loss, I thought, well, maybe I do want it. It was this weird thing that happened. And so then I became intentional about trying and started working with my OB and taking some, ovulation drugs and had success getting pregnant 2 more times, but then had 2 more early miscarriages. And so the doctors were kind of like, well, the good news is you can get pregnant. We just need to keep you pregnant. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's such a weird good news. It's so weird. Because obviously I was super new to all this. I don't know what's good news and what's not. I'm just like, what's happening, right? This is really, really, really traumatic for me. And then I was able to get pregnant again and had a textbook pregnancy. I got pregnant using Clomid. I had a textbook pregnancy, but I also got depression very, very badly from the hormones. And I just had a really, really rough time of it, although on paper everything was great and everything was progressing fine. And I was considered low risk, and I was putting my feet up, getting ready to go into labor and have this baby. At 37 weeks, car seat was in the car, and I went to my midwife appointment, and there was no heartbeat. And that is how I found out that my baby had passed away. I had no previous indication that that was even going to be a thing. It was literally just wait to go into labor, and I was going to do hypno babies, and it was going to be, magical and wonderful and perfect. And straight to the hospital to be induced to deliver this baby who I now knew had already passed away. And that was a little over 5 years ago. And that experience that I didn't even know could happen, I didn't even know that was a thing, changed everything about my life, the way I looked at the world, my experience of how I chose to show up, who I chose to be. Everything was kind of blown up in that moment. About a little over 24 hours later, I think, I delivered this baby who was a little girl. We named her Maeve Evelyn. She was perfect, and we never found out any reason why this had happened. And apparently that's the case half of the time. And, when I held her in my arms, I looked down at her and I was like, oh, if I had been given the chance, I know I could figure this out. I know I could do this. Yes, I want this, right? I want to be a mom. And now I have to figure out how to parent this baby who never took a breath, right? Because I want to create a legacy for her. And so that's sort of been everything that I've done since then. And I want to make her proud and I want her to not be forgotten, right? And because only a few people ever got to see her. And so that was like the defining moment, not only of my fertility journey, but also my life. And so I went on to get pregnant again with Clomid with my rainbow baby, who is now 3.5, another little girl. And then I worked after that with a naturopath and worked pretty intensively on healing my gut and my hormones and taking a bunch of weird herbs I'd never heard before in 20 years of doing naturopathic health and doing food sensitivities and just healing. And I then got pregnant on my own for the first time with my now 10-month-old, another little girl. And now my fertility journey and my family building journey is complete because I am closed for business.
Oh, Christine. Oh my goodness. I just want to take a moment because, I mean, I've done a couple interviews over the years. What I find is that within the span of maybe 5 minutes, you've taken us through years of your experience and some of the deepest depths of sadness and loss that is possible as a human being. So I just want to take a moment because this is heavy and whew. I think that when you said, I didn't even know this was a thing, I didn't even know that was possible. I mean, 37 weeks pregnant, that is, I believe that is the worst, like, it's like the worst nightmare of like every woman who has been pregnant with, so, whew. For those of us who can't imagine, I'm sure there are women listening, though, who've had this experience, because the sad part is that it does happen. Stillbirth does happen. And there are thousands of women who have experienced it. So for the women in the audience who have experienced something similar, share with us just how I mean, on the other side of it, when we're talking and laughing, I mean, you're obviously here and you're doing okay, and you're mom of 2 now, but share with us how you got through that.
Yeah. I mean, humor is definitely a coping mechanism. And I think anybody who's been through something really hard, actually the Harvard Business Review book on resilience talks about how resilient people often use dark humor to deal with the things that they've been through. So that's a thing. Harvard says so. But but it's true that 1 in 160 pregnancies ends in a stillbirth.
Wow.
And I know most of them are not full term, but I discovered a community of people who'd been through what I've been through, and also discovered a community, and anybody who's been through loss will understand this, of people who were willing to be there for me and people who it made too uncomfortable and who disappeared, right? And I think that that's true of any fertility experience if you choose to share it with other people, right? People don't know what to say. They're afraid of saying the wrong thing. They don't want to hurt you, or they're too uncomfortable and in their own heads. And listen, I was that person before I went through all of this. So I don't have any judgment around it, but, well, maybe I do, but like I try to be compassionate about it because I remember what it's like. I know that it's more about them and their discomfort than it is about me and them not wanting to be there for me. It's just like which one wins out, right? But what I've found, the things that kept me from going into a deep dark hole and never coming out, because I knew that was an option. And I could see myself choosing that, right? It was like 2 paths diverged in a wood. Which one's Christine going to be? Like lying in bed for the rest of her life on disability, drunk, or to just not have to deal with it and numb all the time, or finding a way to do something positive, make Maeve famous and make an impact in the world, because I was no longer afraid. Like, I had been a people pleaser. I'm a helper. I am a high achiever. I had like all this identity in being good and nice and kind and helping people. And I still have a lot of that, but I'm no longer so worried about offending people. I'm not really worried about taking risks, because I feel like the worst thing that happened to me that I could possibly imagine happened. It happened, right? Like, I really would have rather traded places with her and like have given her the chance to have a life. And so this happened, the nightmare happened. And so nothing worse could happen. So what the heck, right? What do I have to be afraid of anymore? I mean, seriously. But some tangible things that really helped me. There's this place in Wisconsin/Minnesota, headquarters one place, actual place another, called Face Lodge. And someone told us about it really early on. It's a place where you can go and share in a cohort of people who have lost a child and have like this really healing, powerful weekend. And so Maeve was born in early March. We went Father's Day weekend, so just a few months later. And we were with this group of people. Most of them were professionals about our age, first children, who all lost their kids at full term unexpectedly, just like us. And I have never felt like more seen. And these are people that we now, 5 years later, are flying across the country. Someone drives through, like they stay with us. We spend a weekend with them. And to have that kind of understanding and community was huge. And it's why, just like what you do, Lisa, it's so important to have people who get it. And whether it's fertility or it's loss or it's both, I think that was and continues to be absolutely huge, to have a place to process that. And then, of course, like all the therapy and all the coaching and any kind of support. Yes, 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 and more yes, right? Saying yes instead of being like, I'm good, I've got this, because I didn't got it and I don't got it still, right? So this is always going to be complex, talking to the girls about their sister in heaven, right? And their older sister who, as my husband says, she will always be the perfect child. She can do no wrong because she did no wrong. And he's like, I just know when they're teenagers, they're going to be like, yeah, we can like Maeve. So it's just all these, how do we celebrate birthdays? How do we include her in Christmas and holidays? And it's just always going to be a conversation. And also I'm here for it, right? Because that's the way that I can parent her.
Wow. That's incredible. I mean, when you were talking, I was tearing up when you were saying that. So the greatest fear, the worst thing that could happen, the thing that keeps many of us, like, not this specific thing. I mean this in a broad sense of whatever that fear is for you, but whatever that worst fear is for you that keeps you small, you lived it. And therefore everything else was kind of a moot point. And that's actually a theme that I've heard a little bit here and there, where if you actually go through something like that, then it kind of is like, well, so what if I start a company and fail? Right? Yes, that's where the dark humor comes in, right? Yep. Because like, we already know what the worst thing could happen. And I'm still alive. And some days probably felt like, unfortunately, right? But here we are, right?
Yep.
So that's really, really powerful. I want to ask you a question, and you are welcome to not answer it.
Okay.
I'm asking this question because I'm sure I'm not the only one who had this thought, because the worst possible thing did not happen to me. I had 2 babies that I delivered. So you were given the news that there was no heartbeat, but the baby's still inside of your body and you delivered that baby. Can you talk a bit about that?
My midwife told me what was going to happen, right? I said, what do we do? Right. After they had put me on multiple machines because they were hoping that the one was broken, right? And so she said, okay, here's what you need to do. You can go home and get some clothes if you want, but the hospital's right across the street. You need to go check in there. You need to, they're going to induce you. And I said, no. I was like, you can knock me out and you can wake me up when it's over and you can do a C-section. I'm not doing it. I can't even fathom going through labor, right? I was all ready to have like the hypno babies thing, and we're done all the training and all the things, and had this super clear birth plan and la-di-da, right? And obviously that all went out the window. My husband asked me if he could play the Hypno Babies music for me as I was, getting induced. And I was like, no, that's stupid. I hate it. He was like, okay. Right? I don't want anything to do with that. I'm going to the extreme opposite. I am not here for that. Right? So I said, I'm not doing it. Why would I do that? Why would I put myself through it? Just take care of it. And she said, we can, but and she like choked up. She said, it will be much easier and better for your grieving process, and we know this, if you experience it. And I was in such shock at the time. I was just like, whatever you say. I mean, I just trusted her in that moment because we were very close and we still are. And I said, okay, like if that's what the research says, then I guess. And I was planning to use a doula, and she had never been through this either. And so we were both kind of like, would it be helpful to have her here? Is she going to be able to show up the way she wants to show up? Is it going to be supportive to me? And we ultimately decided, both of us decided, like, yes, she would come and she would support me through it, which was a great choice. And I looked at her and I said, how in the world am I going to like have the strength to do this? And she just said, you're going to garner it. You will. And apparently I did.
Wow. Now that you went through that on the other side, do you have a deeper sense of why your midwife said that to you? Like why she said that would be?
Yeah. I mean, the labor itself was pretty rough because it was induced, and they were trying to do it as fast as possible because, as my midwife told me, like the sooner I delivered, Maeve look was another reason to like get the show on the road and not go home and do any processing or anything like that. That's what she told me. So again, I just listened. And they also encouraged us to do things like take pictures, which I was like, why would I want to do that? Right? Like now that's the thing I would save if my house was on fire, other than the things that are living, right? That's the thing we have backups upon backups of. And we had a photographer who she is from Finland, and Maeve was born in the middle of the worst snowstorm in recorded history in the city where she was born. I mean, it was like, well, the hospital's a good place to be right now because ain't nothing else working, right? I was in a city where like people don't know what to do in the snow. And literally, like, we had to have a friend with a 4x4 truck come and take us home on the roads, on main roads, because we couldn't get our car out for like a week. And so she was not afraid of the snow because she's from Finland. So she came barreling in at like 2 a.m. and just, was willing to take these pictures, which are now my most prized possessions. And to do like a ceremony in the room and to just create some meaning, right? Because we only spent a few hours with her, and I don't remember a lot of it because I was loopy on various things, right? Like my husband says he really got to spend some quality time with her, and I really didn't because I was just pretty out of it. But I did get to hold her, and I did get to get those pictures and kind of share some of those moments with like our parents and a chaplain who drove across town in the snowstorm to do a service for us. And so I did it all because they told me to, because in that moment, it just was all unfathomable. Like you're handing, like I'm sitting here with a pregnant belly and you're handing me a brochure on how to plan your baby's funeral. Like, what is this? What is my life? How did this happen in the space of a couple of hours? Like your brain cannot, you know? So I'm just kind of looking around at people like, have a seat. What do you think we should do? Here, you play, I don't know. I got to go inward and like deliver a baby. But I do understand why she said that. And she was dead on. Because if I had to go back and do it now, I would want more time with her. And I would say, like, I'm not leaving the hospital. I'm I'm going to stay and I'm going to deal and I'm going to try to make some more memories here while I have the chance.
Hmm. What you said earlier came to mind, that people fell into two camps. Some people who were willing to just be there, and others
Right.
who couldn't handle the discomfort. You already know that the reason I'm asking these questions is because no one talks about this stuff.
Yep.
And
Yep.
people do have those types of questions and they don't want to ask it because they feel so uncomfortable and they don't want to make it worse.
Yep.
And by talking about one of the scariest things that you could ever go through, it shines a light on it.
Yep.
One of the other things that came to mind is that how blessed you were to be around the midwives that you had,
Yes.
who had experience and wisdom in this area, because it does feel like the opposite of, in the moment, I would imagine it feels like the opposite of how to handle it. But as someone who's gone through birth, the process of birth it changes you.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so powerful. I don't think I've ever really experienced anything as powerful as birth, and the amount of emotions and all of that. And so when I heard you say that, my intuition resonated, like, but it's also like you don't want to do it's like your intuition's kind of like, okay, that actually sounds like it would allow me to process this, but then on, like, your head is like, no way,
Right.
no
Right.
way, I can't do this. So it's like the head versus the heart, because the
Yep.
heart does know that, but the head would be like hells to the no.
No. Yep. Yep. And my midwife, I mean, I had a hard time finding a care provider that I connected with in pregnancy, because I was dealing with the depression, and I didn't even know that thing, but like I couldn't get off the couch, which is the opposite of me. I lost weight. I couldn't eat. And my husband was like, what is going on? Like he wound up making me call and saying like, I'm not okay. And getting on medication, even though there was a risk, because I couldn't take care of myself. And so I had a really hard time finding someone that I didn't feel like I was being treated like a member of a cattle herd. Just a huge practice where you just go in, get out. Like when so my husband Googled, this is 5-6 years ago, he Googled like midwives in our town, and her name came up and she had one review on whatever the website was. She was the only one. Not like there was no, she's the only one with any rating, and it was a good one. So went in and met with her, and she's the first person that after we had talked, had the first appointment, she just sat there. She was like, what else? I was like, huh? You mean you're not like running out the door? Right? So anytime I connect with somebody that I really appreciate, I just like go out of my way to make them be my friend. so by this point, like, I'm pretty sure, I was one of her favorite patients because I was thoughtful and kind, and we had become friends. And so her like supervising doctor told me this is the first time she has ever been able to show up for somebody in a loss situation. But she's choosing to, right? And she's been a midwife for I don't know how long. She's choosing to because of the relationship that you all have.
Mm.
And ever since then, we have been great friends. My husband and I started a nonprofit. She raises funds for it through various things. And she, like, the picture of her catching my first rainbow baby is like her favorite picture of all time that we've given her permission to share. It's just like this experience for her encapsulates why she's a midwife, right? To have been able to be there on both ends of the spectrum and show up, even though it was extremely emotional and uncomfortable for her. And I think it's really just powerful to witness, like, this is the worst thing that happens in this profession. Like, these people don't get to process it. The nurses, the L&D nurses, the OBs, the midwives, they don't get to process it like we get to process it. They have to go into the next room, right?
Yeah.
And deliver another baby. And so I think it's really important to think about, like, choosing a care provider, right? That it's going to be able to walk alongside you, hopefully become a friend, understand your neuroses if you've been through loss. Because, man, I was hella neurotic with the next 2 pregnancies.
Are you
Let me
kidding
tell
me?
you.
I mean, that was one of the questions that I was going to ask you, obviously, because so I'll share my opposite experience. So I'll just kind of say, and we'll just kind of navigate. I'm not going to preamble it.
Yeah.
So I had a loss at 5 weeks pregnant, meaning that it was the week after I should have had my period based on my charting. Now, working with women as I do, we all jump in with like, well, my experience was nothing because Christine had a stillbirth at 37 weeks. So I think at the end of the day as well, I mean, it's important just to remember whatever that experience was for you and what it meant for you, and just just say what it was, and it's not a competition, right? I mean,
there's no hierarchy of grief. Like everyone says, I can't imagine what you went through. I say that to plenty of people too, right? So loss is loss is loss.
But with that said, so like it was so early on, I did not experience it as traumatic. I was sad. And it did hurt when like it was like the most painful period of my life, if you want to call it that. And I've had pretty painful periods. They're up there with labor. And that experience was worse than the majority of my labor. So let's put it out there. But like for me, then when I became pregnant with my eldest son now, after that, it was immediately after, I was showing, people were calling me out and I didn't want to tell people that I was pregnant. So, but obviously that fear kind of dissipated after I hit my third, like the first trimester, right? Like after, because I had that date, most of us have that date in our mind, right? How did you deal, Christine? Because you had a stillbirth at 37 weeks. I mean, there's no magical number. You can still be freaking out at 37 weeks. Like,
and I was.
I'd be going to the midwife every day. I'd probably buy a Doppler stethoscope and learn how to test the heartbeat myself.
I mean, I was such a head case. Like, my husband told me after my infant was born this time, because I was then also parenting, a 2-year-old, and it was very challenging. He told me, you were hostile in pregnancy, like to the point where I was worried you weren't going to bond with this baby. And he said, as soon as she was born, you were like, baby. And he said, I was so relieved. So from an outside perspective, that was the experience of the person who lives with me, the adult who lives with me. But I was so anxious. And honestly, looking back after my infant was born, I was like, how and why did I put myself through that 2 more times? How and why? Like, I'm glad that I did. But the logical part of me is like, there was something other than logic at play here. I did things, I was like you, I did not want to be approached. So I did things like wear sunglasses in stores and put on my RBF and just look, and I'm a friendly person. I was not a friendly person.
For anyone who didn't catch
that. Resting bee face. I just look real sour. Put on my sunglasses like I was famous. Wear big baggy sweatshirts. People couldn't tell I just gained a bunch of weight, or if I was pregnant, I didn't sleep well. I mean, all of the things that you would expect. Putting yourself in the same situation that created your PTSD. Putting yourself through that trauma again. And then I had to learn how to advocate for myself in terms of when I wanted to be induced to be delivered, right? Because I wanted it to be before the point at which Maeve had died, which we figured was like a couple of days, right? And that was really controversial, and the guidelines changed between, Rainbow Baby 1 and Rainbow Baby 2 with ACOG. And so, I'm working with the doctors, I'm working with the midwives to be like, we need to find a reason to induce me. Like, give me the shot for my baby's lungs, because I don't care if she needs to go to the NICU. She will be alive, right? If I could go back and deliver Maeve at 36 weeks, she would be alive. It's like it became such a relative thing. And people didn't get that. Oh, you don't want a baby in the NICU. I was like, F you. You don't want a dead baby. Like, you have no idea what you're saying. It just became this relative process where I needed to figure out how to advocate for myself and make sure that I did everything I could to not repeat that experience because we didn't know why. So there was no factor to control for other than my body failed me at 36 weeks and 5 days, and it failed Maeve. So how do I control something that I have no idea how to control for?
See, I appreciate you for sharing that with us. I mean, this is one of the biggest challenges when I'm working with somebody who has, maybe they've been trying for a really long time or they've had miscarriages. When they do get pregnant, it's simultaneously the best news and the scariest news at the same time. Because you've been working up to this point for so long, and then it happens and then you're pregnant, but it's now the train has left the station and you really have very little control. I mean, there are things that you have control over.
Right.
You have control over your emotions to some degree. You have control over how you eat, how you sleep, how you take care of yourself, the type of care that you request and all of those things, like the external things. But in terms of the actual baby growing in your uterus, like there's no control. And what I always say to my clients is that this is the metaphor for motherhood. Because once you have a baby that comes into the world alive, there's no controlling another human being. They come out with their own personality, their own challenges, their own whatever they are. And whatever you thought parenting was going to be, like, it's not that. So it's just not. It never is. I mean, the challenge too, Christine, like looking back, obviously we do the best that we can do with the knowledge that we have. And I think that you did amazing given the trauma that you went through. The challenge is that had you done nothing, your two beautiful babies may have just come into the world just fine, and you'll never know. And so the hard thing, I think, for most of us is actually letting go of the fear. And one of the things that I've said a lot to my clients over the years is, like, especially in these situations where it's been a long time trying or multiple miscarriages, it's like, once a day. So this is just my thing. So, take it or leave it, right? And everybody's listening. But I truly believe that it's okay once a day to put your hand on your belly at whatever stage of pregnancy that you're in and close your eyes and imagine for a moment that everything turned out amazing, exactly how you wanted it. If you're at the beginning stage of your pregnancy, imagine yourself with a big belly and you're complaining that your feet hurt and your partner's making fun of you and you're having this wonderful moment, and make it so real that you even might start to tear up. Do that for 5 minutes every day. And I promise you that you can freak out and stress out for the rest of the day, whatever you need to do. But like, give yourself, like, imagine that it turns out okay and live in that moment. Live in that moment, even if it's just for a couple of minutes every day. Because if you don't allow yourself to just imagine and live in, like, what if this could turn out okay? And what if whatever, then you're constantly always living in the worst case scenario. And we don't even know enough about energy to know if we could be manifesting it. So I feel we at least need to be giving ourselves a period of time. And that's hard, but I still strongly, firmly believe that.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I got that same advice when I was pregnant with my first rainbow baby, right? And freshly, Maeve was born in March. I think it was cleared in June. I got pregnant in December. So still the same year that she had been born. And the grief was still so raw. And yeah, I had friends say, like, what, just spend some time, like you said, visualizing that this is going to be different, that this is going to be better, that you are giving yourself permission that could be true.
Just popping into today's episode to invite you to join us in the upcoming Fertility Awareness Mastery Live Postpartum Edition. This all-new exclusive 3-month program was specifically designed to help you navigate fertility awareness during the postpartum period and beyond. You'll learn how to identify and chart your basic infertile pattern, how to identify your first ovulation so you can predict when you'll have your first period, and how to confidently rely on fertility awareness during this unique phase of life. You'll also learn what you can do to optimize your cycle and prepare for pregnancy while breastfeeding, and so much more. We're starting in the second week of August, so make sure to reserve your spot today. Head over to fertilityfriday.com/PPLive, PP like postpartum, to join us today. So again, that's fertilityfriday.com/PPLIVE. Now let's go ahead and jump back into today's episode. Yeah. Well, and a question that I had, so you mentioned how difficult that pregnancy was for you and the depression, and just, it sounds like it was very just not good at all.
Right. Right.
What were your other two pregnancies similar? I mean, obviously they
They,
would have been stressful for the different reasons,
yeah.
but
Yeah, they were. They were. I knew what to expect, which was helpful.
wow. So each time
Right.
they were like that.
Yep. I was super sick for most of the pregnancy. I so in the subsequent after Maeve pregnancy, like I knew I just need to eat, even though I probably am going to throw up most of it, right? Like I don't need to be losing 10 pounds in the first trimester and laying on the couch lethargic, right? And the second rainbow baby, I couldn't do that because I had a 2-year-old, right? Not an option, which made it even more exhausting. But man, the hormones just, no matter how I got pregnant, right? The hormones just really, really wreaked havoc on my mental health, on my energy, and on my like digestion, on my sleep. I was not a glowing, happy pregnant person. It just wasn't kind to me.
Well, I mean, this is why we need to have these conversations. One of the things I've often said, particularly as it pertains to miscarriage, so less so stillbirth. Well, I shouldn't say that, but miscarriage, I would say, is more common. But one of the things I would say about that is that it's just part of this like systemic issue that we're not educated about anything related to our fertility and our health, right? Let alone birth and all these different possibilities. So you mentioned that you didn't know that this was a possibility, and most women don't realize how common miscarriage is until you have one or two.
Yes.
And so it's this most devastating thing that you didn't even think was a possibility for a lot of women who experience miscarriage for the first time. It's just they're completely shattered, and they have no idea that half of their friends also had miscarriages but didn't tell them because we don't talk about it. So it's like once you have a miscarriage, you're welcome into the miscarriage club, and all of a sudden people come out of the woodwork. People come to your door. Like all of these people that you had no idea also have a miscarriage. And so it's just something that one of the things that I share with my clients, and again, it's like you can look at it two ways. You know, the way the medical system seems to look at it is that we're scaring people. But the way I look at it is we're adults and information is useful. So when I share with my clients that when you hit the age of 40, statistically speaking, 1 out of every 2 pregnancies ends in miscarriage. The miscarriage rate varies by age. So overall, the miscarriage rate may be about 15%, 15 to 20%. But when you are 20, the miscarriage rate is closer to maybe like 8%, like between 20 and 25. But it goes up significantly once we hit our 30s and mid 30s and 40s. And by the time you're 45, it's like you have to get pregnant 4 times to keep one, statistically speaking. Now, if people knew that, I feel like it doesn't make it easier. Miscarriage is always horrible. But if you knew that, the first thought in your mind might not be, it's my fault, my body's broken, something's wrong with me. Maybe if we knew the statistics and we talked about this more, that we could at least just, again, information, it helps us to contextualize. It helps to know I'm not the only one going through this. If it's that common, there are hundreds of thousands of women who have also had this happen, and maybe I can find some support.
Yes. And the same thing happened to me. I thought I didn't know anybody who had been through this or knew someone who had, but one of my very best friends at the time, who was a little bit older than me, she shared with me that her mom had a stillbirth. And what happened was it was the time when women were put in twilight to deliver. Right.
Oh, Jesus.
So
she was in twilight. Say what that is, because there are people who don't know.
It's like almost unconscious, like
they knocked them out and pulled the babies out.
Yes.
Like, there are people who are so young that they don't know that was a thing.
Talk about traumatic, right? But they thought that was the kind thing to help you deal with labor, is to knock you out. Right.
So they would give you drugs and basically you'd be unconscious, and then they would take forceps and pull the baby out. Just for the listeners who don't know what twilight birth is. And it's real. Look it up.
Yep. So yes, thank you for that. So she's having her baby. Normal. This is what's normal. Baby passes. They kept her in twilight until after the funeral because they thought that's what was, that they thought that was what was the best at the time. This is probably the 50s. And my friend said that she could remember, this would have been her older sister who passed. She can remember her mom just going to the gravestone and crying and crying and crying and crying for years, right? Nothing wrong with that, but she did not get to process like I did. That was what used to be the standard. And honestly, her mom, my friend's mom, now has dementia. And before she had dementia, she was addicted to Xanax. And I was like, I know why, right?
She didn't get to process.
How do you live with that, right? Obviously, it affected her deeply.
Her baby. She didn't get
No.
Oh my gosh.
No. And she went on to have other children, and she never forgot that little girl that she lost, that she never got to hold, that she never got pictures with that, right? So that, I mean, there is a generation of women living with that. And where it was, don't talk about it, get pregnant again as soon as you can. That was the advice.
Oh dear. Well, when you were sharing your experience and, the midwife's advice and what you went through. So a lot of my friends are nurses. And so like one of my really good friends is a labor and delivery nurse, and she has experienced, obviously it's exactly what you said. Like she's experienced these things, and then obviously it's not the same, like you don't get time to process, but she shared a similar experience of a woman whose child was born with encephaly, and basically the child was born. And for those of you who don't know, encephaly is a really serious, it can be really serious, life-threatening birth defect. So the baby was born, but the baby couldn't survive. And so she knew that was going to happen via ultrasound and all that. But the whole family, all of her children and everybody were in the room. And so I just want to say that because this is something that actually does happen, like in the world. This is something that people go through. And it's something that for whatever reason, we don't talk about as a culture. But what occurred to me when you were sharing your experience, and one of the reasons why, one of the first things I said was so fortunate that you had this level of support. It made me wonder for women who don't have that level of support, whose practitioners maybe are really busy or who don't have the same level of sensitivity to the mother and the baby and the family for a situation like this. It made me wonder what the experiences are of women who don't have the opportunity to have that. I mean, the twilight is like the worst. If there's worse, I don't know. That feels like the worst. But it made me think of all the women who didn't have that opportunity and didn't have that level of support going through something like this. It could make it so much worse.
Absolutely. And frankly, some of the people that we've met, right, through Face Lodge and through, you should talk to Christine because she's been through that. Maybe she can help you, right? Or somebody just went through this. Christine, can you send me the articles that you've written about what to say, what not to say, blah, 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 right? And some of our friends, based on the state laws where their baby was born, weren't able to spend much time with them, or had to have an autopsy when they didn't want one, or right? Or like the doctors wouldn't work with them in their subsequent pregnancies to induce based on the experience. Like, nope, sorry, you have to go to XYZ, whatever it was. And so I think you're exactly right. I mean, there are plenty of people who didn't have the experience that I did and who will not have the experience that I did. And so, I mean, that's so much of the reason that I'm here talking to you, talking about this thing that's obviously not easy to talk about, because it's really important to me to have these conversations, because it will help people in the future who go through this and know that they can advocate for themselves, right? Like, until I make all the money that I need to prevent preventable childhood deaths and figure out what causes this stuff and like fund the heck out of it, it will continue to happen statistically. And so I want, just like with miscarriage, I want people to be resourced around what is the most helpful, so that you can kind of go on autopilot and go, they said to do this thing, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to ask for this thing, right? As more and more hospitals get, okay, there's a network of photographers that they can call. There's a beautiful nonprofit that makes these incredible gowns for these babies. And Maeve had one. And so I like stalked the hospital until I found out who the organization was and became a supporter and, spoke at their keynote and all this stuff, because I'm like, we have to raise awareness for this. It's happening. there are people who are serving these families, and just most people just don't know about them yet.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, I just want to thank you again. I'll probably just keep saying it, but for sharing your story so openly, for having this difficult but powerful conversation and shedding some light on this, because this is a topic where people really stay away from. I haven't done a ton of episodes, but I did one with a doula, and there's some criticism because it was, there was abortion we talked about miscarriage, and we talked about stillbirth. And so obviously there are some folks that found it to be, it's always controversial when we talk about any of these types of things, but to kind of talk about it together. But from that perspective of how the doula supported women through these various things, it's an interesting process to hear how women experience it differently. And yeah. But these are the challenges that can happen. Birth and fertility and infertility is so complicated and so challenging. So let's talk a little bit about how this experience transformed you. You touched on it a little bit, talked about the importance of getting the support that you needed. That can't be understated or overstated, or whatever the right way to say that is. But share with us, I think the one question that I want to ask, but I don't want to ask, but I'm going to ask it, is, would you change it?
It's such a great question. And a complex one.
Yeah.
Right? The further out I get from it, the more gray the answer becomes. First and foremost, now I have these 2 little girls who I wouldn't have if I had Maeve. Ain't no way I'd be getting pregnant 9 months after she was born if she was here and alive.
Nope. That's a hard no on that.
Not gonna happen.
Hard pass.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. So I'm super aware of that. My family would look really, really different. And I think I've gotten a lot more into the spiritual meanings of all of this. Like, for a long time, I blamed myself, and I felt as a parent that I was, and as her living in my body, right, where she died, like, I felt responsible. And I remember I was talking to one of my coaches, who a business coach, but we had these conversations because that's just how I roll. And I said, like, I don't know if I can be okay, like, living with the fact that I somehow caused this, and, like, I'm responsible for her death. And she said, Christine, if you believe that we are all co-creators, which I do, then Maeve was as much a co-creator in this. Like, she had choice to make in this. And I thought, that feels helpful. I'm going to hang on to that. Selective, whatever you want to call it. Selective morality. I'm here for it in this case. But, like, another friend of mine, I don't know if I believe in this or not, and I don't think it matters because, again, it was helpful. But another friend of mine told me that Maeve and I have been together through multiple lifetimes, that we are, that we have this bond that shows up differently, that, we have these different relationships, but, like, she is still very much here. I have the mourning dove as a symbol for me, and for a lot of reasons. And there are, like, she sets off toys in our house, like, in the middle of the night. On her birthday, one went off, like, all day. That has never, ever gone off by itself before, until the batteries ran out, like, hours. Wow. And you know what it was? It was the stethoscope in the kid doctor kit, and it was a beating heart. Like, what is that? So I have all of these things that bring me a lot of comfort. Like, I would never have chosen this, but to answer, like, I think there's more of me that wouldn't change it than that would, for all the reasons I've just said. And for, like, the opportunity, like, the gift in this is that she gave me the chance to reinvent my life. And I have. I'm now doing work that I really believe that I'm called to do. Like, this is my work in the world. I would do it forever and for free, right? And I am doing it forever and not for free, but, like, I'm helping women all over the world, like you are, right? Which is how we met.
Yeah.
And so I'm finally like have found my purpose in terms of work, in terms of career, and in terms of like the impact that I want to make. And I've stepped into that. Like I found my zone of genius. And I wouldn't have if I didn't have this experience with Maeve, because I was comfortable enough and I was scared to change the comfort. And then when I got as uncomfortable as I could possibly get, then I was like, well, screw it. Let's go to the next level. Let's figure out what that is. Like we talked about, I'm not afraid anymore. I'm doing this thing. I'm going to help women like change their lives using the things I'm good at. And I don't know what other experience could have helped me become that person. And then also to like serve with a nonprofit to help people who've gone through stuff like this, to have a platform that talks about how you can go through something really hard and still create a life that you love, right? I mean, I think up until that point, I had this story of like, so I grew up in church, right? So everybody, you hear a lot of like testimonies, and usually they're really dramatic ones. Like, I was on the streets and now I'm, not because of God, right? So I had this story that I didn't have a great story or a great testimony because I had not been through really hard things in my life. I mean, I had some stuff, but I had this perception. And then that sort of in me, and I think a lot of other people's too, for obvious reasons, like legitimized my ability to help them. She's been through stuff. She gets it. She's not just like sitting somewhere sipping wine and raking in her trust fund. Not that I had one, but like, perceptions of people. Right.
Yeah.
And then I was just here for that in a way that I wouldn't have been otherwise. And so, yeah, I think that's my answer.
So powerful. Well, one of the things I've noticed, I mean, once you do get pregnant and you do have a baby, then you're mom and you're busy and your mind is in a different place. So the fertility challenge ends when you get pregnant and have your baby, because there's no longer a fertility challenge. So for the women who are in the trenches, so to speak, who've recently experienced loss, and this is why they tuned into this episode, who are scared of experiencing loss. They're pregnant, and I don't know why they're torturing themselves and listening to this episode, but you know who you are. If you're pregnant, maybe I'll say this at the beginning when I put it in, but like, I don't think when I was very pregnant, like in the 36, 37 week, or, whatever that stage was when you're really big and you're feeling like you're about to pop. I didn't watch any like bad birth videos. I only watched the good ones. I only watched these women who looked like they were sleeping and just like pushed it out, like with the hypnobirthing. I refused to watch anything, and I didn't want to hear, because when you're pregnant too, everyone wants to tell you like, guess what? And I was like, no, shut it down. Only easy sleeping births over here.
Yes.
So,
totally.
If you're pregnant, I think I will say at the beginning as opposed to the end, but like, don't listen to this episode, wait until after the baby comes, maybe.
Yeah.
But then some of the women who are listening may have had a loss previously.
Yep.
So then they're listening for a reason that's different. So there's no judgment here. Do what you want, but I'm just saying, don't torture yourself. But I get it if you are. So totally get it. We're supportive. All sides. We're supportive. Anyways, so the question out of that is for the woman who has experienced loss and isn't there yet. It's not easy, but you're in a different place now.
Yep.
So you're coming and showing up with lots of energy, lots of love, lots of understanding, lots of wisdom, because you went through the trenches, you've been through it. For the women who are not there yet, what do you want to say to them?
Yeah. It is okay to feel however you feel, as cheesy and cliche as that is. It is okay to feel like you're losing your mind. And it's okay to hate the world and feel like it's so unfair and unjust and why me, and that you want to put on sunglasses and talk to no one, and sunglasses inside, and put on your resting bee face and hide out from the world if you want. Like, it's okay to like sit in your car and scream if you want. And I just think this whole experience has given me such empathy and understanding for the idea that we never know what's going on with someone else. Never. I can remember going to the grocery store for the first time after I came home from the hospital after Maeve died. And I'm walking around with my mom, and I'm so out of it that I turned to some man and started talking to him like he was my mom. And my mom's standing several feet away on the other side of me, and she was like, what is happening? You know, and then I caught myself. I was like, I'm sorry. But what I realized walking around that store is I'm looking at people going, they would never know what I just went through. And I have no idea what they're going through either. Right. And so there's this quote that I love that says, be kind, for everyone you know is fighting a hard battle. And I think that's what I would say, but I would say first be kind to yourself, because when we're going through this stuff, it's so easy to beat ourselves up and blame ourselves. And like, I get that. And also there's no one right way to feel or do this. And I think it is an opportunity to ask yourself what you need and give yourself permission to get that, be that, have that, ask for that, because no matter how this journey looks for you, that you're going to hone and develop in order to make it through this journey, whatever it looks like, and to have beyond it, whatever that looks like.
Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness, Christine. This is just such a powerful conversation. As we draw to a close, I mean, we could end there, but I just want to give you the opportunity. Is there anything that you would want the listeners to leave with today?
I think the knowledge that you're not alone and that you can survive anything, even if it seems unfathomable or unimaginable, and that the way that you do that is by getting help and saying yes when people ask if they can help you. I remember that people didn't know what the heck to do to help us. And so people started offering to bring us meals. And I literally said to my husband, I don't feel right saying yes to that because I don't have a baby to hold. I physically can make my own meals, because that's where I was to that point. I was independent, proud of it. I don't need anyone, right? And he said, Christine, people just want to do something. They know they can't do anything to make it better. They want to do something, just let them. And so I said, okay. And the meals started coming. And I found myself really grateful that I didn't have to cook. I didn't want to be cooking. So I still don't want to be cooking, but I especially didn't want to be cooking then. So I feel like that's such a huge lesson. That's such a tangible thing. Let people help. Let people who are available for the hard stuff in your life be there for you. This is why we're having this conversation. Whatever you've been through, someone else has too. And between your circle of people that you already have and the internet, like, you can find them. I found other blogs and wrote the author and said, thank you, I don't feel alone, right? I found you in the middle of the night. I'm weeks out from this experience. I'm really glad to know you're further out. Like, do that. Utilize whatever resources you have and allow yourself to be supported, even if you're so independent and even if you've never done that before, because that's what makes the difference.
Oh, so important. I love that. There's something that, so before we started recording, I asked you, I said, what do you want the listeners to take away from this episode? I was like, that'll help me ask questions or whatever. And I wrote down just what I wrote down from what you said was, no matter what you've been through, it's possible to survive and thrive. You get to make your own meaning. Thank you so much for being here, Christine. This conversation was more powerful than I could have imagined. I've been tearing up over here constantly and my heart has basically just been singing, because I feel that these are the conversations that we need to be having. These are the real experiences women are going through. This is why I do what I do and you do what you do, because all of this, the stuff on the TV with everybody smiling all the time and happy, and then all that weird, like futuristic, crazy stuff that we should not be watching anymore. None of that has anything to do with reality of what people are actually going through. And these are the meaningful conversations that are necessary and that we should be having. And I feel like this is a really important part of learning about our fertility and learning about how to manage this role that we have in the world as creators. And I say that as women who make babies.
Yep.
And these are, it's almost like the secrets of the red tent of all of the midwives that have come through all of the years. This is the wisdom and the knowledge that they impart, because these are the real experiences that life is made of, right? Like not like primetime TV.
Yes. I just got chills when you said that. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Okay, well, let us know a little bit about you, what you do, your programs, where people can go to learn more about you. You mentioned some blogs that you've written. Like, just tell us about all the things.
Yes. So I founded a company called Life with Passion, and I help high-achieving women to replace their incomes and in anywhere. So if you are working on income replacement and you want a free chapter of my book, you can go to lifewithpassion.com/free chapter. So I'm running a special on my Kindle book right now and like giving all the proceeds to Feeding America and Save the Children. I absolutely would love to connect with you on Instagram. I'm at LifeWPassion. I seriously love to have these one-on-one conversations. You probably wouldn't guess it, but I am an introvert, so I am here for all the one-on-one conversations. And that's the best way to get in touch with me, is either on Instagram or grabbing a free chapter of the book, which will connect you with me everywhere else. And that's lifewithpassion.com/free chapter. I also have a podcast. If you want to learn how to build a business that you love from your passions, it's called No One's Ever Asked Me That. And we go in depth on how to do this whole business thing on your own terms. And we have a lot of fun. So check that out too.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here and for sharing so openly and honestly and fearlessly of your story. I don't think that neither you nor I can imagine how important this episode was for so many women. I don't think we'll ever really know, because thousands upon thousands listen, and you just never know. This episode was probably exactly what so many women needed to hear today. So thank you so much for just being here.
Thank you for inviting me and for creating this space to have this conversation.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please share it with a friend. You'll find the show notes page for today's episode over at fertilityfriday.com/324. I hope that you enjoyed today's episode with Christine. I mean, what a powerful conversation. I was in tears. I'm sure you were in tears. We were all in tears together. But thank you so much to Christine for coming on the show and sharing her experience and being such an inspiration. It's just incredible to think about the types of challenges that we can make it through. And it was just so inspiring to hear Christine talk about how she turned essentially an unimaginable experience into something positive. And just one of the things that she said that struck me was that since she had already been through what many of us would consider the worst possible thing, it made everything else seem like a non-issue in terms of motivating her to follow her, entrepreneurial dreams and also her motherhood dreams, and just kind of do what felt right in her heart. And so I hope this episode was inspiring to you. I hope that, especially for those of you who have been in the midst of experiencing your own losses, miscarriage is so common. I talk about that on the show. And as is fetal loss, so much more common than any of us know. And it's often only when you experience loss of your own that all of a sudden you realize how many others have experienced it as well. So I've spoken to so many women over the years who they had no idea that so many of their friends had experienced miscarriages or other types of loss until they experienced one. And then it's like, everyone came out of the woodwork to share their experiences. But before that, so many of us had no idea that so many women have gone through this. And so I hope this episode has been inspiring for you, hopeful, but also to acknowledge that deep pain that loss can cause. And of course, the way Christine continues to honor Maeve. It's so inspiring that she's essentially taken a stance that, my baby won't be forgotten. We're going to always remember her and talk about her. And again, this is part of the conversation that we don't hear about a lot. And especially for anyone who's gone through loss and experienced miscarriage, we don't really have a template for how to do this. And so there's a lot of feelings and a lot of, thoughts that you might have around it. And, how do I do this? What's right? Is it okay if I do this or that? And I feel that for many of us, Christine, in the way that she's handled it, has given us permission to handle it in whatever way that we would want. And so with that, I just want to thank you for tuning in to today's episode. If you know somebody who would benefit from listening to it, the link to share is fertilityfriday.com/324. And I hope that you have a wonderful week, weekend, day, whenever you're listening to today's episode. And of course, as always, until next time, be well and happy charting.